On this episode, Andy is joined by Juicy Jimmy. Welcome to the Road Home from Wrestling interview.
Here in my car, I feel safest of all. I can lock all my doors, and it's the only way I live in cars.
All right, well, welcome back to the Road Home from Wrestling interview. We're all stuck inside, so we're going to be talking to as many people as we can. My name's Andy. I'm coming to you live to tape from the Road Home from Wrestling world headquarters of the world. And today, my guest is Juicy Jimmy. What's up, Jimmy?
What's up, buddy? How you doing?
I'm good. Tell the folks out there, how are you surviving? You live in the kind of central northern Kentucky type area. How are things down there so far, dealing with this whole virus thing and all that?
Minus stores being closed and us not being able to do public gatherings and stuff like that, really stuff hasn't changed a whole heck of a lot for us, except, people a little bit more cautious about going out and like the stores and of course restaurants, you got to do to go orders, and just people are scared, man. And it's a really weird time in America. I'll say that,
Yeah, and it sounds to me like you're okay, and that's, what's important, and hopefully you and yours are okay and everything, and that's kind of, and everyone out there, I hope that they, are the same in the same situation, and everyone's being careful and all that stuff. But one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because you have kind of impressed me of late, and we've known each other for a couple years now at this point, just seeing each other at shows and saying hi and stuff like that. And you've always been someone I kind of wanted to have on because of your deep Kentucky roots, which we'll get into that a little bit. And I would assume the 3 million hilarious stories you have in that brain of yours. So, but one of the things I wanted to mention right off the bat is the first time I ever saw you wrestle was actually at it was a Pro Wrestling Freedom show. It was at your favorite place, the Arena. And it was versus Levi Everett.
Black Beauty.
Right, Black Beauty, that's right. So it was versus Levi Everett.
Actually, that was a PPW show. Yeah. And here's the thing about that. That night, I was supposed to have wrestled Freight Train, and for whatever reason, he didn't come or whatever, okay? And, honestly, Levi, it was cool. Levi was pretty young. He's still pretty young, but, I kid around with him, whenever I see him in the locker rooms, I'm like, kid, you worked with me, then you blew up. I said, you owe me a big thank you. And I just tell him that all the time. And he's like, well, you hit me right in the face with a lariat. And I'm like, yeah, but man, look what happened after the match. And I just love to pile on every time I see that kid. I really enjoy that kid. He's awesome.
Now, in that match, you were also dressed like a bottle of Crown Royal, or like the bag of that comes in, the Crown Royal comes in. What's that all about? And we need to talk about what makes Jimmy juicy. This is kind of stuff I want to talk about today.
Well, that gear, there was a point in my life where I would hang out with, and I still do. I call her my sister, Christina Harvey. Her I won't say husband, Joe, at the time. He has since passed away, and sorry, I don't have a positive ending to this now because he just passed away last week. Me and him would sit down in their basement, and we dubbed it the Crown Lounge, and every one of those bags that were used to make that gear, me and him would put away on the weekends there. And yeah. And I just had this crazy idea. Huh?
I said that's a shoot then, huh?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was a sad deal. He passed away last week, just suddenly, and I have since retired that gear, and you guys never see me in that gear again unless it's promo pictures or videos or what have you. I can't even begin to wear it anymore, just to be real. Well, it doesn't fit anymore, but like me, I would not wear it anymore, just to be real with you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's nice out of respect. And obviously, our thoughts go out to the family of Joe and you and everything. And we're sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
But I was just going to say that initial match, I thought it was a really good match. And I'm sorry, it's hard for me to distinguish between the PWF and the PPW shows of that time.
Dude, trust me, it was hard for me running PWF, and like you aren't the first person that it got us confused or this, that, and the other. Like, trust me, it happened all the time. And especially during that time period. Like, yeah, I can totally understand.
Well, you kind of mentioned it before, but I want to get into this, so we might as well get into it now. Is the Juicy Jimmy that I saw that day or that night is a different Juicy Jimmy than I saw at Paradigm just a couple weeks ago, versus Brett Eisen and versus Brett Eisen's little BB gun guy and all that stuff. What's changed in your life? And tell me, why has this all changed for you?
Man, I'll tell you. When PWF ended, like, I sat here and I didn't know what I was going to do, like, as far as wrestling goes. I didn't know if I was going to jump into promoting another show or if I just wanted to wrestle. And quite honestly, that, like, between the headaches of running wrestling and just, poor choices in my life, like I had ballooned up to like 500 pounds and I was miserable, man, miserable. Like, and there's a point I can pinpoint to this. There was a match I had at PWF against Tyler Matrix, who I think is an extremely talented pro wrestler. And man, basically it was 15 minutes of me laying on the mat. Like, I became every old timer that I hated coming up, that were just lazy, couldn't do nothing. I don't know why they're still in it. And trust me, I heard all that, okay, from people that come to the shows, and that had a real big effect on me, like, mentally. I didn't know it at the time, but, like, man, I knew I had to make a change, and I kind of stepped away from wrestling for about 6 months-ish. And then, I kind of just started dipping my toe back in once I started going back to the gym. And I just said, I'm going to get in better shape. Like, by no means am I in great shape now. I'm working on it. I wish they'd reopen the gyms again, but, that's another topic another day. But, I started eating better, and, I really thought that I said to myself, into 2019, 2020, like, I'm 36. If I'm going to do anything, it's got to be now, because the window, is slowly closing on me, So, but yeah, I just got bound and determined to get in a lot better shape. And honestly, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make really a good last go of this.
Yeah, and it's been impressive. Like I said, I've said on this podcast before, when we've run into you recently, it's been impressive to see that you've lost, hundreds of pounds possibly. I know you don't keep track, which is pretty cool, actually.
No,
I like that, So, but, it's obvious you've lost, maybe 150, maybe 200 pounds. I'm not sure. It's pretty awesome. And, I want to get into that a little bit, but the effort that goes into pro wrestling, what you just said there rings very true with me because, I've seen many guys that maybe shouldn't be in the ring or whatever the case may be, now that it's up to me to say. But, just think about Andre in his latest years, and he couldn't even stand without holding onto the ropes, and it kills his legacy as a wrestler. I mean, it really sucks to see those matches, and it also sends the wrong message to the younger wrestlers that, hey, you don't even have to try. You know what I mean? And so tell me about effort in pro wrestling and how much that means to you, and maybe, give me an example of somebody you see nowadays that just gives 100%.
Man, I tell you, there are a lot of guys that go out there now and will just lay it all on the line at every show. And I know this is going to sound cliche, but it doesn't matter if there's 5 people there or 500 people there. Don't get me wrong. I'm going out there and giving effort now, but if I'm in a crowd of, say, 5 people, there are certain things I will do if there's a big crowd there or a small crowd. Don't get me wrong, I'm still giving good effort now, but some of the guys there will go and just die in front of 12 people. I'm not at that age anymore to do that, to be real with you. But and as far as pinpointing someone, there's just so many dudes out there that go hard every night. And just Drew, I don't know how long you've been going independent shows, but right now there is more talent across the board than I have seen since the late 90s, early 2000s, to be honest with you. And it's just there's a ton of guys out there right now that I think will end up doing big things given the right opportunities.
It's really crazy, and the amount of talent that's concentrated in our perspective areas as far as that goes. That's a big part of it too, is that if you live in Wisconsin or something like that, you might have a couple guys that you see that you go, oh, okay, these guys are stars, but when you live in our area and the half the card of every show is guys that could just step right into WWE right now, that's pretty awesome, and we're really lucky to be a part of that. Now, something you mentioned a second ago about, effort in the crowd dictating your effort. Okay, I get that 100%. A couple points I want to make about that. One thing that's pretty cool about nowadays is that a lot of these shows are showing up on IWTV. So even if you're wrestling in front of 20 people, you're not. You're wrestling in front of 1,000, which is awesome. And that has to give you that kind of motivation as if you're in front of a lot of people, right?
It does, and I've done a lot of those tapings and or live events they have, and it definitely provides a different platform now for the guys. Like dude, I come from an era of shows were lucky to be recorded a lot of times, to be real. And who knows, if it weren't for Bobby Blade, I don't know what would have happened to some of this footage, to be real with you. But it's really cool, and I definitely think it gives the guys a little something extra to work hard for.
Now, if you are one of those guys out there that is bouncing your head off the concrete at a show with 10 people that's not taped for anything, I would ask you to look up a former Cincinnati Red and find out what happened to this guy. His name is Ryan Friel, and I don't want to tell his story on here because it's very depressing and awful, but he was this guy that played for the Reds, and people called him, Charlie Hustle Jr. and all this stuff because he played at 110% always. He had a real rough go of it, and he's not around anymore. And I would highly recommend folks look into his story just as kind of motivation for maybe I don't want to do the double moonsault, off of the barricade into the chairs, when there's only 2 people watching. So just my opinion. I'm never going to hate on somebody for that kind of thing. Now, you mentioned a guy, and I have some questions here listed. I don't usually do a ton of notes, but one of my questions is Bobby Blade, ? and that's the question. Tell me about Bobby Blade.
Oh, Lordy. If this tells you how long I have known him, he was one of the two wrestlers at my high school graduation in 2003. And I'll never forget it. And this will tell you what kind of a redneck community I lived in. Okay. Our graduation was at our football field, and it was kind of like, like people here don't necessarily dress up well a lot of times. And I'll never forget, he pointed out to me that there was someone at this graduation camp, or not camp, but who had on a handsome Jimmy Valiant
Oh.
even back then. And I'll never get, Blade was there, and he's like, man, that guy's, he's like, look over there. And I'll be damned, this dude was in a handsome Jimmy Valiant shirt at this high school graduation. And I will never forget that. But, I met Blade through, I'd have to mention Jeff Vickers, Chic Aftershock, Country Cousin Jeffro, whatever you want to call him. He was a regular in the Kentucky Independents for a lot of years, and I met him through him, and we hit it off at an early age. Me and him have been friends ever since, man. Through a lot of good times and a lot of bad, So, but yeah, like, he's a very complex individual. He'd be somebody great to have on your show here.
I've asked him to come on. He said no. So, I don't get it. I asked him a long time ago. He said no. So whatever. I don't chase people around. If you say no, you say no. I'm not going to hate on you. But now, were you around for the Simba character? And if you were, how over would Simba be now with all this Tiger King shit going on,
Oh, man, it'd be over huge with the Tiger King stuff going on.
Tell folks what Simba is, too, by the way.
Well, here's the thing. He did that in the mid-'90s, and it was, from his description to me, I never saw it live. Like during that time period, I just wasn't going to shows. I would have been a teenager or tween, I guess is the term for it now. I've been going to independent wrestling shows since the early '90s, and like he describes it to me. The Lion King movie was hot at the time, okay? And the guy who was running the shows in Georgetown at the time, he tells a great story. He's like, hey, Bobby, he says, that Lion King's over. He says, you know what we need? We need Simba. And Blade tells me that he just kind of looks at him and he's like, you want me to be a cat? And he had this orange face paint on and these tiger striped long tights, and man, of course I've grilled him on this when he's told me this. I'm like, was there like any explanation from you going to that to Bobby Blade, from Bobby Blade to Simba? And he says, no, it just came out because back then that's kind of how they did things for the most part. Okay, and apparently I guess he was Simba for 6 or 8 months, and just it's kind of been the rib and joke with all the boys here for a lot of years, man. But yeah, if he were to come out with that today based on the Tiger King thing,
yeah,
man, that thing would be super over.
It would be over as like a self-aware kind of gimmick too, not like, like he's really believes that he's a cat or whatever. It would be a lot more fun if he were, had a manager that was Joe Exotic and he came out. I don't know. I think that'd be pretty awesome. if you guys, basically Bobby Blade dressed up. I mean, and it's a pretty good outfit. I mean, he could probably be in the Lion King musical if he wanted to in this outfit. And he's dressed up like Simba, and he came out and wrestled as Simba, and it's fucking ridiculous. And it's one of the things that makes me love wrestling, not wrestling, wrestling.
Yeah.
That is so fucking wrestling. Tell the folks, Jimmy, what's the difference between wrestling and wrestling?
Wrestling to me, here's the thing, I try to explain this to people from the Northeast, and they just don't really kind of understand it. But wrestling here for years and years, and really up until recently, has always been wrestling, okay? And ridiculous gimmicks, everybody kids around about the 50-50s at the show. It's every kind of possible money grab it shows you can have. It's just, fans that, at one time thought what we did was legitimate. And don't get me wrong, they're still out there. They're not a big portion of the audience anymore, I don't think. But there are still people out there that want to believe. I've seen people hit the ring. I've seen people willingly go to jail because this guy did something or said something to them during a show, and it's just, man, it's down and dirty pro wrestling, and quite honestly, I love it, man. I do. Anytime I go to Tullahoma, Tennessee, and work for Yukon Jack down there at Southern Wrestling Federation, it's still like that to a big degree. I know I'm going to get called everything in the book. I've seen guns drawn down there. I've seen knives, and it's just, to me, that's wrestling, man.
It's awesome, man. I think it's so much fun. And when we first started coming down to Kentucky to seeing shows and ATW and stuff, we were like, what the fuck is going on here? Because it's
it's actually calmed down quite a bit from what it was.
Oh, I'm sure. Now we've seen guys try to fight the wrestlers at in Ohio too. I mean, it still happens, but it's what blows my mind about wrestling is that you mentioned that the fans buy into it even more. Then why are the gimmicks so stupid? And that's the thing that doesn't really jive, but there's only one explanation. It's well, that's just wrestling. Because, you hear about the Memphis stuff where the Ninja Turtles wrestled a Christmas tree and all this kind of stuff.
Chris Champion.
And those same people would be like, hey, there's no room for funny in wrestling, and we can't do goofy shit. And they had a Christmas tree wrestling. You know what I mean? So it's how do you explain that kind of, dissonance?
You can't. You can't. Memphis, really, in all honesty, still had a big influence here. I would say up through probably the late 2009, 10-ish, okay? And that just never died. It was either, Memphis-based shows, or just like the Pafos were huge here too, and people around here, man, they still remember that stuff. And honestly, I used to try to push against the grain of it, and I think that's what a lot of the older fan bases really enjoys here.
Wow. Yeah, I get it. I mean, I've seen it with my own two eyes, and I love it. And I think that when you mix the two things, when you mix kind of the northern style and the southern style, you get kind of what's on TV now. As far as AEW and all that. Especially the goofier stuff that you see on to me, a character like Orange Cassidy is a mix between Memphis, just stupid as fuck gimmick wrestling, and and wrestling, and also the kind of northern flippy style. And and that's an interesting thing, because there's a lot of younger fans who think that they may see the Ninja Turtles wrestling, a monster, and think that's fucking stupid. But when Orange Cassidy puts his hands in his pockets, they think it's the greatest thing in the world, and it's the same fucking thing, right?
Let me tell you what. The Ninja Turtle, is odd as this sounds, okay? Chris Champion did that at one point, and I knew Chris toward the end of his life, and he would tell me about all the money he would make on Polaroids in the ring. Man, let me tell you what, when the Ninja Turtles were over, I could only imagine how much money he was making at intermission off kids who thought this was a legitimate deal. I'll tell you something, Drew. One of my earliest memories going to independent show, I'll never forget. I saw a flyer here in my hometown. It was for a show in Georgetown, and I'm gonna say this was probably 92-ish, okay? And I'll never forget the poster. In big, bold letters, I saw Junkyard Dog, okay, versus British Bulldog. And, man, as a kid, I'm like, man, this is a huge deal. And I begged my uncle to take me, and he took me over there. It was on Sunday nights, okay? And I will never forget, I got there, and I'm like, man, these guys kind of look like them, but they kind of, just a little something odd. Well, I got a flyer from that show because I got it signed by everybody who was on the show that night. What I didn't realize was, next to these big bold letters in this main event they were advertising, in very small, tiny, just minuscule, they had Junior next to it. Okay. Yeah. And dude, that used to go on here so much. Between that and all the, I have seen so many doinks wrestle here in the state of Kentucky.
How many Patriots have you seen?
It's ironic. Yeah. There's one guy who did the Patriot gimmick who was around when I was first breaking in, and man, you talk about a character. If you could ever get Larry Corey on your show, he is a salty old veteran, but man, he's entertaining. He is entertaining as anything. But he did it for a long time here, and it was just kind of the norm, to be honest with you. You know what I mean?
They've been doing that shit in Mexico for years, the Junior thing and all that. And
here's a great Patriot story for you, Larry Corey, whatever you call him. I told you he was just a salty old veteran, and I hated him when I first started. Okay, because I was like, man, this guy's lazy. He don't do nothing. Blah 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 blah. All right, and we were booked on a show in Lexington for the Steels, KCW. They were around for a few years, and he literally walked in the locker room, and he walked into this locker room and saw that there were 40 or 50 dudes on this show, and I'll never forget. He had his bag in one hand, and he had a thing you put a suit jacket in on his other, and he looks in the locker room and he says, ain't no money to be made here tonight with all these guys booked. And dude turns right around and walks out and gets in his car and leaves. And I thought, I'm like, man, this dude will never get booked here again. Dude, I'll be damned. He was back the next month.
That's like the Scott Hall story I always hear, is when he showed up to WCW, he'd walk up to people in the locker room and say, hey kid, what's your finish? And the kid would say, and he's like, can't wait to kick out of it and just walk away from it. It's pretty great.
Yeah, but like, and like the thing about it is, like, guys like that, I in a weird sort of way, I did learn a lot from those guys. Sure. Granted, sometimes it wasn't, what not to do, but like I have some very fond memories of like guys like that, even though at the time I may have not really appreciated them as much as I should have,
Well, okay, so tell me a little bit about Mark Morris. You came up with him a little bit, and we don't get to hear Mark Morris stories on this show very often, other than, we like him a lot. He's awesome. We love his son, and he's a hell of a guy. So, I mean, if you can tell me an embarrassing story, that would be preferable.
I don't know if I have, say, an embarrassing story. He was running MWA toward, I guess, the last 5 years of their existence. He was kind of at the helm, him and Chris Hayes. Chris is actually the dude who trained me to wrestle, and I was off again, on again with MWA. Like that's a big thing in my career. Like I generally don't stay somewhere that long, especially back then, because I wasn't, I would quit, get fired, like just the whole nine. And me and Mark at the time, like we've come together since all that ended, but we had our issues. But the thing is, I always respected about Mark is he knew how I felt about things, and I knew how he felt about things. But here's a good Mark Morris story for you. We were wrestling over in Mount Sterling, Kentucky, and we were doing this thing. He was the big heel manager there at the time, and he had renamed the MWA like the Morris Wrestling Association, or excuse me, I tell you wrong. I believe it stood for Men with Attitudes. Okay. Yeah, and like so somehow he was the commissioner at the time. Don't ask me to explain that because I don't even remember. And this building was just so hot in the summertime, and I'll never forget. There was a picture taken by the guy who was doing photos there at the time, and Mark was in a pair of blue jeans and had his shirt off, and I called him do you remember John Zandig at all? He used to work for CZW.
Sure. I mean, how can we always forget? He's the guy who screamed Jesus, so sure.
I called Mark. I was like, man, you look like John Zandig. And of course, Mark didn't have any idea who that was. But Mark's a really good dude, man. Like me, I like to give him shit, and he likes to give me shit. And we dubbed our little clique rebooking the territory here, and it's just we like to rib one another and bury one another, and it's really fun, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think I became a honorary member of that that group, at one point a couple years ago. So, we love Mark, and we love. What's that? Go ahead.
Just make sure you pay your membership dues to me directly, okay?
Okay. Oh, sure. Yeah. By the way, hanging out with a bunch of old school workers from Kentucky, I'm not believing a goddamn thing any of you say ever at any point. So.
Membership dues.
Right, that's awesome. Well, okay, so another thing that I've kind of been talked about a little bit on the show when we've been able to see you is that there's a lot of things you can do in the ring. There's a lot of things you can't do in the ring. But one of the things that's great about you is that you're able to work to your strengths and kind of see your opponent's strengths and help those out as well. One of your strengths is a great working punch. Tell me, how do you develop a great working punch, and what is a great working punch?
It's developed I tell you what, there have been times when I was trying to figure it out. Like when I first broke in, like I was told it'll take you 5 years to really develop a punch. Well, I hate to tell you, but for me, it took like 10. Okay. A lot of times I would just haul off and knock somebody right in the jaw. And eventually you just you have to study the great punchers. Jerry Lawler had a great punch. He immediately comes to mind. Terry Funk had a great punch, and there's generally one thing in common with all these punches. Now, granted, it's not every one they throw, but every few they're going to be pretty snug. Okay, and at times, I just learned how to study people's faces and where to hit them at, and honestly, I feel like that's one of my strong points. I'm not good with forearms at all, because I generally will take somebody's head off with a forearm versus a punch is a little bit easier of a ride for you. But it's just I prefer throwing work or punches more so than I do forearms and stuff like that. That is the norm now, to be honest with you.
Yeah, the forearms are a little out of control nowadays. One of the things that makes me laugh so hard is when I love seeing a fairly green wrestler who's a skinny flippy dude throw a forearm, because it 100% time looks like fucking shit, and but at the same time, guys like that, like Myron Reed, when he first showed up on the scene, he was throwing these pussy ass forearms, and now when you see him throw a forearm, he fucking nails dudes, and it's awesome, and it's he had to develop that. So it's really fun to see, guys catch that over time, but it almost would look better for some of these guys if they would just throw a punch, in my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, without a doubt. And I tell a lot of the new kids that, and they look at me like I have flaming turds coming out of my mouth. And Kerry Awful, who's one of my really good close friends in this, I'll never forget. He used to do those forums, and I was on him. I'm like, dude, you got to learn how to punch. You got to learn how to punch. And he slowly got it. To me, it was something that the veterans drilled to us. Kentucky and Tennessee, and generally this whole area, has always been a punch kick territory. Okay, and what I mean by that is, if you want to watch a lot of the matches, not so much now, but the basis of them were punches and kicks. I mean, it's what the area knows, and it was something that was drilled into me. You got to learn this. You got to learn this. You got to learn this. You got to learn this, and you either will eventually get it or you won't, and you'll be a dude who's stuck doing forearms. And generally, the guys who can punch really well, generally work their way up the card a lot quicker than somebody who doesn't, just generally speaking, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of my take on that whole thing.
Well, what you're talking about, this kind of brawling style that you see a lot down that way, one of the things that is a benefit of that style, though, is that it makes a high spot a high spot. So, when you're working up to a superplex, if you've been kicking and punching each other this whole time, then a superplex is something completely different, and it's a legitimate high spot, as opposed to just a setup for your next 6 suplexes you're going to do or whatever, right?
During training, Chris Hayes would often tell us this story. And he would let us try to do all these stupid high spots and this, that, and the other. And he would, and I'm assuming this was late 80s, early 90s somewhere. He was talking about Georgetown, and he says, and forgive me, I forget who was involved in the match. He said, guys, he said, I can remember a guy taking a suplex, okay, and them selling it well enough that they backed an ambulance in there, and people bought into it, legitimately.
That's awesome.
Yeah, But yeah, no, man. Like I do think it really makes the high spots stand out a lot more if you have a punch kick brawl style, and those moves don't get lost as much as they do. It's like other areas of the country if done correctly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, when I'm a musician, and I grew up in music and stuff, and I played in the marching band, and I played snare drum. And if you've ever watched a marching snare drum, most of the notes that they play are like maybe an inch off of the head. And then when they accent, they bring the stick up higher. And the motion of doing that and the actual ability to hit the head harder makes that accent stick out. And the quieter you can play those other notes, the lower notes underneath, the more those accents are going to stick out. And that's kind of the dynamics that you're dealing with in a pro wrestling match. And, and there's a lot of different thoughts about on that. And I know that a lot of people nowadays really like the high-paced stuff, that there is no selling or psychology, and it's just move after move. And I like that too, to some extent. However, when a match like that works a little psychology in, it sticks out a lot, and when some of these brawls and stuff like that you're talking about that are all psychology, like, I love that stuff so much, man. It's so great when I see it. It gives me such a great feeling to know that, that superplex or something meant something. And that guy that fell off that top rope and hit the mat with his back for the 3,000th time actually did that for a reason, and that's kind of the most important thing,
right?
As far as that goes. So my next question might take a while to answer, and you can answer this however you want.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm not holding you to anything. But my question for you is, why does booking suck? That's my question, I guess.
Sure. You're basically a paid, generally when you're booking, you have some financial tie to the show somehow, some way. Either it affects your income or you're directly paying some of these people. And it is the biggest babysitting job you could have. Like guys' day of the show, oh, I can't make it. Then you have to scramble to try to find this. It doesn't matter if you had this guy booked in a feature position or not. You got to replace him because the show goes on. No matter who you are, the show will move on without you. And it's just, I've booked shows, I'm going to say, for 8-9 years at this point, although I don't do it anymore, or for now, I should say. It's just everything, any problem that can usually go on does, and you're forced to make, changes on the fly a lot of times. And to me, if you're booked, you're booked. Be there, man. I would understand now if if shows had to cancel or this, that, and the other. Don't get me wrong, that's not what I'm saying. But if guys don't have transportation, that's a common theme in wrestling. Guys have to get rides, and sometimes you have to be the connect point between talent of oh, well, if you don't have a ride, hit up so and so. He's coming right through your area. You can ride with him, and then they take it the rest of the way. But it's a very rewarding but yet challenging at times. If that makes any sense to you. You mean?
Yeah, it's like wrangling cats, right? I mean, nobody wants to do what they want to do. I mean, it's 5 minutes before the doors are supposed to open. Your main event hasn't shown up, and one of the guys won't get the fuck out of the ring so you can open the doors. Oh, by the way, 3 chairs weren't set up for these VIPs you got going on, and the barricade on the left is falling down. And that's just something that, that's just from a show I've been at, you know what I mean? And this is kind of the shit that you're dealing with always. And, I can understand why it's really tough and you don't have to name any names or anything, but I have my rules that I set in place for this podcast. For example, one of my rules, which I never talk about, is if you cancel on me, all right, last second, all right, and there's not a good reason, you're just kind of, or you just don't respond, which happens all the time to me, I'm not having you back on, and that's just the way it is, and I'm not being a shithead, I'm not trying to be an asshole, but if you waste my time, I'm not going to waste any more time with you, and I'm not going to chase you down. Right. What are some of your rules that you had when you were a booker that if you cross this line, you're done?
My big thing was if I had you booked for dates and you canceled on me, you went to the back of the line. Like, and don't get me wrong, there's exceptions in that. I was listening to Jeff Jarrett on Sean Mooney's podcast a few weeks ago, and I think this even rings true for independent promoters as well. Okay, he would talk about his dad's in Memphis, talking about, Austin Idol will never work here again, blah blah blah. Well, the houses got down, and guess what? 6 months later, Austin Idol was back, and I still think that rings true depending on who you are independent-wise as well. If you're over, you can kind of skate by that, although I don't recommend it. You can be hard to do business with. I dealt with Isaiah for a lot of years, and I'm not out here to bury anybody or anything, but he was extremely hard to deal with. I've known him for several years, or a lot of years, I guess I should say. And it was always on again, off again. But generally, let's say somebody 2 years in the business just straight no shows me. Well, they're probably not getting booked by me again. Now, if somebody calls with, and they've got some elaborate excuse or what have you, okay, maybe. Or if something that used to infuriate me during the arena days, if somebody would cancel on me to go work for the competition, yeah, you're pretty well done for a while. That's just how it is. I hate it when guys wouldn't listen to me on times. If I say 6-8 minutes and you go out there and do 12 or 15, first time you're probably going to get a warning. If you keep doing that, we're going to have a little chat, and you might not be working for me that much longer, but it's just, I think everybody who runs shows has their own set of different rules. One of my rules was guys, if I have you doing something in a story, I don't want to see, you on Facebook or Twitter, being buddies and pals. Sorry, I just don't want to see that. I don't think I think that openly slaps the fan base right in the face. You mean?
Yeah.
I just do. And I don't want to see you all hanging out at Buffalo Wild Wings and watching a game as a pitcher, but yet I'm trying to sell this as, something else, so it's just that's one thing that always kind of infuriated me, to be honest with you. You mean?
Yeah, it's like they're not taking it seriously, and yeah. That's one thing is that if the wrestlers aren't taking it seriously, and I know there's exceptions to that, and there's fun stuff you can do in wrestling, but if you're not serious about what you're about, then why would the fans give a shit? And when you insult their intelligence like that, it's kind of frustrating for the fans. Now, as a fan, I remember when I first started going to shows, and I would go to certain promotions regularly, and guys would come and go. And, of course, that's just the way wrestling is. And I really didn't know at the time, all the things that I know now. And so I'd always wonder myself, why isn't that guy back? What happened to this guy? He was here every week, and now he isn't anymore. And if you're a fan out there, listening to this, the answer to that question could be a million different things, And so it could be, the promoter hates the guy. It could be he slept with somebody's wife. It could be, it could be he botched a bunch of moves. It could be he's such a good wrestler that he doesn't have time for that shitty promotion anymore. There's a million different reasons.
Right.
And it's fascinating to kind of hear the backstage stuff a little bit, because then you realize, man, just when you think you know a little bit about wrestling, you don't know shit, and that's kind of the interesting thing about talking to someone like you and all the folks that I try to keep up with on a regular basis.
Right.
So at this point, I've only seen you wrestling at PPW, but I know you're wrestling some other shows too. Obviously, we don't have anything to promote because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone in a month. But what's been like? I mean, obviously you had to have a lot of fun with that Brett Eisen match. What's been some of the kind of more fun matches you've had on this Comeback Juicy Jimmy tour here?
Man, honestly, some of the matches, we did GCW. They run Wombat, and I tagged with Effie against the Rejects, and that was just such a fun match. They ran that like a old USWA TV taping. Okay, and what I mean by that was this is all live. This wasn't taped. They would have us go out, who were in featured matches later in the night. They would have us go out and work with with enhancement guys, earlier in the night, in 3-minute matches, and do an interview and then set up, and just that match to me was very fun. The match with Eisen was a lot of fun. I had a 4-way dance at the last PPW show, and I generally hate multi-man matches. I don't care who's in them. It's just it was me, Calvin Tankman, Eisen, and Bandy. And, man, I'm telling you, I would love to have a singles match with Tankman. That dude is awesome. And then there's been matches in Tennessee I've had at Yukon Jack's place that nobody will ever see that I have had a lot of fun with. There's a kid down there named Tyler Thorne who is awesome. I can't put him over enough. But yeah, man, I was, before this whole virus thing hit, I was supposed to have went to work for IWA East Coast to do the Night for Necro. It was supposed to be me and Peter B. Beautiful against Pondo, Madman Pondo, and Shadow WX from Japan. And I was really looking forward to that, but unfortunately it had to be postponed. I do occasionally like to do the blood and guts. I don't want to do it every show, but every once in a while, I'm more than happy to do it, that's kind of, yeah.
Can you explain to folks, and maybe I'm a little off base on this, but I think I'm on point here. Can you explain to folks why it's kind of less dangerous in a lot of ways to do a death match than it is to do a flippy style match? Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I laugh at some of the guys that are well, I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to do that. But yet they'll jump off a 20-foot ladder, but that's okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's crazy. Meanwhile, everything you're hitting yourself with for the most part, or hitting each other with in a death match, can't injure you. It can only hurt you, and that's kind of the idea, is that the best weapons in a death match, they make a noise, they make you bleed a little bit, but they don't injure you. Right. Meanwhile, you said, just doing, a moonsault could, it could kill you. And so it's just one of those things that I always think it's funny when people will post a GIF of someone I don't know, just doing something gross in a death match, and they're like, "Oh my God, right. It's so dangerous." And I'm like, "Yeah, granted, I don't want to do it. Don't get me wrong. It's just a matter of I think the perception for deathmatch wrestlers is still a little bit on that real side, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and two, here's a great story for you about death matches. Okay, I was booked at the Carnage Cup. I wrestled Pinky Sanchez there in 2010, 11. I can't remember which year it is. And John Rare was down there, and he in the death match thing is quite infamous, let's just say. Okay, they did this spot to where the dude he was having this match with, like, both of these guys were like Alabama independent guys. Like, I didn't know him from anywhere else, where he got stabbed legitimately with a box cutter in the arm, and man, it was a ton of blood. But the funny thing about it is, like, he had the box cutter in the back, and of course, you know me, I'm rather inquisitive. I said, "What are you gonna do with that box cutter?" And I said, and he says, "Oh, it's for the match, blah blah blah." And he says, "I stole this from work." And I said, "Oh, you did?" And I said, like you gonna like at least change the blade in that?" He's like, "No." He says, "I'm gonna do it as is." And and at this point, I'm kind of freaked out at this point. Okay, and they go out there and do this. Like, I thought dude was kidding, all right? And like, they go do this, and dude, I'll never forget dude coming back to the dressing room. He has his arm tied up with like a wife beater T-shirt, right? And like blood's just coming everywhere, even through this T-shirt. And dude's got a bottle of either Jack Daniels, Jim Beam, or whatever, and he's sipping on it, right? And dude, just like the old West movies, okay, he takes a big gulp of that and pours it on the cut up arm. Yeah, it's one of the things I will never unsee in my life.
That was awesome. Well, I mean, obviously, there are the things that people are doing nowadays, which are too far, in my opinion. The knife boards, the boards that are full of scissors. That's, I mean, come on, that's not deathmatch.
Yeah.
That's just stupid, in my opinion. But
Madman Pondo taught me everything I know about death matches and deathmatch wrestling. Like, as far as, well, this stuff looks really dangerous, but here's the art of this. And I think a lot of the guys now could benefit from someone like that versus, hey, let's go out there and just get all cut up. You know what I mean? Because, I hate to break it to everybody. Like, don't get me wrong, will these things still cut you at times, and does it still hurt? Absolutely. But is there an art to kind of doing that? Absolutely there is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's another thing that, when I see guys put a, I don't know, that baseball bat thing that they make out of a water jug and hit each other in the head with that. Yeah. That's not a gimmicked weapon. That's a fucking real weapon that makes a loud noise because you're actually hurting someone with it. And I don't like that kind of stuff. I want a lot of my friends wrestle. I don't want them to get hurt. I don't want them to get a concussion from some stupid, bat gimmick thing. But
I'm actually glad the headshots have been calmed down to a degree, because, man, when I was coming up, it was almost a badge of honor to not put your hands up on a chair shot to the head. Like, I took so many unprotected chair shots, and I played football for first grade through 12th grade, so I had all that on top of it. Like, concussions are not as much as what they used to be, although back then it was, hey, suck it up and go on. Just to be real with you, that was the mindset. Sure. It didn't matter how you felt, and I'm actually glad the headshots are not as big a factor. Like I've actually seen when guys throw a chair shot to the head now, like, when it does happen, like, man, people kind of get shit on now for doing that, to be real with you. You know what I mean?
It's true. You could, that could turn a wrestler heel, in a match. It could.
Oh, yeah.
if you do that. And I've seen, there's a guy out there named Matt Justice, right? And he and Mance Warner and even Levi nowadays, they're doing a lot of unprotected headshots. But it's funny because sometimes they'll do this spot where they do 3 in a row, and the first 2 no hands, and then that third one, here comes that hand, because it's like, brother, what are we doing here? But it's scary, man. I don't know what to say about all that, but
dude, like, I wrestled Balls Mahoney at the Gathering one year, and like I was a little apprehensive of his chair shot because like it's just what I've seen on TV, and I heard all the like everybody put it over. It's this brutal thing, blah blah blah. But he actually took the time to explain to me the art side of what it should be versus what it's not. And believe it or not, like, now I'm not saying every night, like, in this, that, and the other, there is an absolute art of how to do it properly where it minimizes the injury. So, like, as weird as that sounds, Drew, like it was a thing at one time. I mean,
well, what's it Stone Cold always says, that they don't teach you how to hit people with a chair in wrestling school, and maybe they should. I mean, that's kind of what you're saying, is that they should. They shouldn't. A lot of the stuff that happens in pro wrestling is on the spot. Hey, kid, we're going out there tonight. I know this is your third match. You're going to give me 3 headshots with a chair, and that's when it happens. It's not, hey, we've been planning this for 3 weeks. Let's practice hitting each other in the head with chairs, and there's a lot of things in wrestling you can't practice because of risk of injury and stuff like that. So it's crazy, man.
I mean, dude, if this tells you anything, I got blood in my very first match. Like, just, like, as weird as that sounds now, like, I was terrible at it, but it was something at 18 years old I wanted to do, and you couldn't convince me otherwise. Even in a commission state at the time, and I can tell these stories now, like, we benefited from no real internet presence at the time, and no like if it would happen today, the athletic commissioner would know about that before the show was even over with, to be real with you. I mean,
yeah, he's that guy is all up in the business of all the wrestling, and that's a whole subject for another time, I think. But it's got, I mean, that whole commission thing's a lot of good, a lot of bad with it. I hate it.
I could talk all day about that, my feelings on that. I'm with you.
And I'm not, I'm not trying to talk shit or anything, but the thing that gets me, which I don't understand, is that, like, some show, there's a charity show that's hundreds of miles away from Frankfurt, but we're driving all the way out there on a Tuesday to piss test a bunch of wrestlers that are working at a charity show. Fuck off. What are you doing? I mean, I don't understand. That's the kind of shit that pisses me off, but,
Yeah. I'm with you 100% on that.
Well, this has been an awesome conversation. We could go on for hours, I guarantee you. However, we can't do that. But it's one of those things where, I really want to talk to you more about so many other things. But we, like, our conversation, amount of subjects we could cover are so wide that I was really having problems trying to figure out what we were going to talk about, although I knew it would be fine. Right. It's just, it's been a lot of fun, man. And I'm really enjoying seeing, all the stuff you're doing, and it's very inspirational. And I'm so happy for you, because, it's just one of those things that making changes in your life is one of the hardest things that people have to do, and seeing it right before your eyes with which actual physical results, and you smile a lot more than you used to. And, it's just, you're a happier guy, obviously. I'm really happy to see that. And, but we got to wrap this up. But before you go, do you have any questions for me?
No, man. Just I enjoy what you guys do with the indie shows. Like, you go to them, you support them, and then you do your podcast on the way back to your all's houses or whatever. I like you. You don't know how many of the boys listen to those and like, for their matches or what have you, whether good, bad, or indifferent, your views on that. And like it really means a lot to some of the guys, to be real with you. And just hopefully, once all this virus stuff is cleared away, like hopefully we can get back to having some more wrestling, man, just to be real. Yeah,
it's sad right now, but it's giving me time to talk to folks like you, so I'm going to try to see the silver lining if I can. And, it's always nice to hear that the wrestlers listen. I always expect our listenership is about 50% wrestlers most of the time, because they no one is giving them that instant feedback. And that's one of the things that we're able to do as fans, is to give that feedback almost immediately. It's just a couple hours. And most of the time, the guys that haven't even left the building before I'm putting up the episode, and they can listen to it on the ride home. So, a lot of people agree with the stuff that we say. A lot of people don't, but either way, we're fans, so our opinions matter one way or the other. So we appreciate it.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, you are a paying consumer. Like whether I think you're right, wrong, or indifferent, you have that right because you've paid for a service. It's no different than going to Walmart or going to a movie. Like, I went to a lot of movies and I thought they were terrible. Okay, but guess what? I paid a ticket. I have that right to say whether I like that or don't like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and the other thing, too, that I really like to benefit or help, that I hope people benefit from, is the fact that, like if we go to a show and you're facing, the guy that's what's Brett Eison's little buddy's name that you wrestled? I can't remember his name now. I'm so sorry. Peyton. Yeah, Peyton Poison, right?
Yeah.
So, who else is talking about Peyton Poison? No one, right? So, we really like to highlight folks that no one else is talking about. And you don't know how many times someone who's in England, someone who's in another state, someone who's in another country has messaged me and said, hey, man, thanks so much for hipping me to whatever wrestler. I would have never known about him without you guys. And that's the reward right there. Like, that's the ultimate thing. It's like, yes, cool. Because that's the power of our podcast, and that's what it's all about. Is we're here to kind of let folks know about the Juicy Jimmies and the and the Peyton Poisons and the PPWs and the PWFs of the world. So and we have a wide listenership, so it really works out. And I'm really glad we finally got to have you on. Let's get some social media plugs in, and then we'll wrap this thing up.
You can find me on Facebook and Twitter at Juicy Jimmy. It's pretty easy. Go like my page on Facebook. I've got a like page, and I've also got a Twitter. Go follow me on there. I talk about sports, wrestling, whatever it might be. The only thing I don't do is politics. Don't bring that to my pages. I don't care. No offense to anybody out there. It's just not my thing. But yeah, just engage me in a conversation. Go follow me. I put up cool videos from time to time. I put up, like I've been talking about Tiger King, and I hope Joe Exotic gets out of prison soon, because I would love to have him on a show. I just think he's quite interesting. But yeah, go follow me on there. My Twitter account at times can be pretty risque, where my Facebook is a little bit more conservative, a little bit. And two, I'll leave everybody with this. Go out and support the independents, because the guys out there on it today, you don't know that 5 years from now, this guy could be a main eventer on Raw or SmackDown or AEW or what have you. Like, this is really where the stars are born and bred at, you can meet some great friends along the way too. Just coming to shows as fans, and just come and have a good time and support the guys and gals out there working, because they're working their tails off for sometimes little to no money. And, to entertain you for better or worse. And, I really think post-virus that independents are going to be back, and we're going to be back in full swing, and we're going to need every drop of support we can, to be honest with you. I mean,
absolutely, man. Well, you guys know you can follow me at Drucifer Tweets on Twitter. You can follow our show at the Road Home FW. Give us a review if you like. That's always pretty cool, and it means a lot to us and helps people find our show. So, for me and my guest, Juicy Jimmy, thank you guys so much for listening.